Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. We are today looking at this novel which needs no introduction, The God of Small Things. At the outset, let me also remind you that this lecture is about various ways in which this novel, The God of Small Things, could be read. This is a novel with multiple interpretative possibilities, and hence it also requires a very different kind of an approach. If you survey the available material, the secondary material, the critical material written about The God of Small Things, you will realize that this is a novel which is at par with the Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. And quite rightfully, this is also celebrated as the next big thing that happened in the history of Indian fiction in English after Salman Rushdie. This is a book cut event. This is also one such novel which changed the trajectory of Indian English writing, which brought Indian English writing to the international arena and international attention after Rushdie. While reading a novel like The God of Small Things, it's important to keep in mind that the significance is in the narration more than the story, more than the plot structure. The importance needs to be given to the way in which the story is written, the way in which the story gets narrated and told to the reader. For the same reason, perhaps Arundhati Roy has this epigraph at the outset of the novel: "Never again will a single story be told as though it is the only one." Here we find Roy challenging the idea of a single story and exposing us and alerting us to the possibilities of multiple stories and multiple narratives which are waiting to be told. And this is not the only narration that is possible. She is reminding us even before the storytelling begins. So what is this novel about, The God of Small Things? This is about how small things affect people's behavior and their lives. And this is an account of the childhood experiences of the fraternal twins, Esther and Rahel, who are also the protagonists. And their lives are being destroyed by what the novel refers to as the love loss. And this is how Roy talks about the love loss, the laws that lay down who should be loved and how much. We find this statement that appears fairly early in the novel as one of the defining aspects of this entire plot structure, of this entire narrative scheme. And different people had different things to say about The God of Small Things. According to the critic Alok Rai, he points out at one level it's about growing up, but it's also about a caste-ridden society and about what it is to be a woman in a male society. The history is there, but as natural as the air one breathes. Her achievement is that she's enlarged the imaginative field. Look at the different kinds of words which are being used here. About growing up, it's about caste, it's about gender. We find history seeping in, and there is also the supreme quality of imagination at work. So this is a treat which has rolled many things into one, which you would also realize when you begin reading the novel. While talking about the reception of this book, this was a critical and commercial success at the same time. This, if one were to believe what we find online, this is a work which received £500,000 in advance from different publishers. But Arundhati Roy as an author comes across as a different sort of a person, different kind of an author among the others in her own league. She does not seem to care much about the size of the advance or the kind of fame that this work brought her. And she spoke about this advance that it is irrelevant, as this is not a greedy little book, referring to The God of Small Things. And the instant success that she enjoyed within the national as well as in the international scene, was seen as just a fabulous circus by her. This is how she viewed the success of the book. And according to Pankaj Mishra, who also happens to be the former editor of HarperCollins and the one who was responsible in bringing this book to a line of international publishers, he remarked, even when he had read the manuscript, that this book stands apart for the sheer quality of its prose and an experimental style which most Indian authors had never dared to try. So this certainly has been acknowledged and acclaimed as the biggest thing that happened after Rushdie. In the post-Rushdie moment, if we try to take stock of the many literary events that succeeded Rushdie, it's possible to say that this event, this literary event of The God of Small Things, which happened 16 years after Rushdie's Midnight's Children, this certainly is the next big event. And this was published in 1997. And this was Arundhati Roy's debut novel. It took her 4 years to write this. This received stellar reviews abroad. There were many comparisons that the critics sought to make with Rushdie, and it also became an immediate international bestseller. But she was also critiqued more at the home front for the depiction of the scenes of violence, of the scenes of sexual intimacy, which were part of the novel. She was there was even a legal suit filed against her for charges of obscenity, and some public figures took offense because of the novel's take on communism, caste and Christianity. This definitely ruffled a number of feathers, as it was a critical take on many things that we take granted on a day-to-day basis, like the political parties or the caste system, or even Christianity or religion, which is superficially presented as a religion which is immune to the many difficulties or the many challenges of caste. Coming back to the kind of reception that this book received, it won the Booker Prize in 1997, and it was also listed among the New York Times Notable Books of the Year for the year 1997. Talking about the structure of this novel, this has 21 chapters, and the titles of these chapters are fascinatingly interesting, just like Rushdie's Midnight's Children had interesting titles. The first one is Paradise, Pickles and Preserves, which also reminds us about the pickles and the chutneys in Rushdie's Midnight's Children. And it has got a range of different kinds of narrative structures spread across 21 chapters, and this novel is essentially written from a minority perspective. The point of view is from that of a child. There are these two children, Esther and Rahel, who are narrating this, but from a third person narrative. This is set in the town of Aymanam in Kerala, so we can say that it's an Indian and a regional location, and this is one of those novels which is not set in any of the metropolitan cosmopolitan cities of India, not in Madras, Bombay, Calcutta or Bangalore, but in a very village-like setting within Kerala. We find a number of allusions to real life Indian history and politics in this novel almost throughout, but one also needs to keep in mind that this is primarily a work of fiction. While we are being attentive to the history and the politics that the novel engages with, one should not forget that it should also be seen within the frameworks of fiction where this book belongs. As pointed out in the beginning, this is a novel with multiple interpretative possibilities. So the question, how to read The God of Small Things, may have varied responses and different kinds of answers. This could be read as an Indian post-colonial novel. It can be read as a work that uses tools of resistance. Many have tried to also read the author's life along with the tools of resistance used in this novel. It could be read as a novel of dissent, and Arundhati Roy herself has said that the only thing worth globalizing is dissent. We can of course find a number of works looking at this novel as a novel of dissent. And this can also be read as a narrative representation of social protest and an implicit engagement with India's socio-political history. And again, this activist expression takes the forefront of most of the readings about the God of Small Things, because Roy herself as a person has always come across as someone who's got concern for many socio-political causes, and there were outspoken reactions from her part which were critiqued and which continue to be critiqued for various reasons. And reading the God of Small Things as a post-colonial novel is something that we shall be doing as part of this course. We find that Roy, in a typical post-colonial fashion, responding to and critiquing the attitudes and practices of British colonialism. Though this is set in a fairly contemporary period, we find that there are resonances of British colonial period. There are certain vestiges of colonial practices which continue to dominate the ways in which the society is structured and the ways in which individuals behave, judge each other, or influence their family lives or their lives outside. And there is a certain way in which this novel tries to assert the richness of Indian indigenous cultures, making it impossible to break it down into neat, comfortable categories like the British used to do for convenience of understanding. Roy is trying to show us that this categorization perhaps is not as easy as one would imagine it is. You talk about Christianity, you talk about communism, and there is this inherent understanding, perhaps an understanding which was handed down as a result of the colonial past, that there are certain areas which would continue to be immune to the evils of caste or the systemic suppression or oppression of caste. We find Roy challenging all of those aspects through this narrative space. And accordingly, we find a retelling of Indian history from the perspective of those colonized, whether we agree with that story or not, whether we would like to accept a different version or not, that's a different question altogether. But the important thing is that Roy makes it possible for these stories to be told from the perspective of the colonized. It's not to say that Roy is the one who initiated this telling, this mode of telling. We found it emerging from the early 80s onwards with the watershed event that happened in the form of Midnight's Children. We find Roy's novel further cementing those ideas and further accentuating the possibilities of Indian English writing. And we also find this novel as a post-colonial novel, restoring the connection between Indians and their natural built environments from which they were alienated during colonialism. This is an aspect into which we shall not be going into detail, but one can definitely locate a number of works which talk about the landscape and the environmental concerns in the context of this novel. What makes the God of Small Things extremely interesting and distinctive is perhaps its narrative features, which were, one could say, almost unprecedented. While Rushdie totally broke away from the colonial straitjacket in terms of language, in terms of narrative techniques, we find that in Roy, there is a local flavor also which is being infused into this narrative technique, into this already liberated, already nuanced and already different narrative structure. This novel is narrated in the third person narrative, in the third person voice, but at the same time it very skillfully adopts the thoughts, images and language of children in the form of Estha's and Rahel's speech and thoughts. There's a fragmented structure to this entire book. Narrative time does not correspond with chronological time, so one may have a difficult task trying to figure out the chronological order in which events happened. It's not a difficult read, but the non-linearity does require the reader to engage with it in a more focused way, in a more intense way. We also find the novel employing alternating narrative threads. There are flashbacks and flash forwards. There would be certain instances which get referred to in the first chapter, but one would get to know what exactly happened in that instance, perhaps in one of the later chapters. So it requires this multiple connections to make sense of this novel as a whole. You may recall that similar strategies were employed in Amitav Ghosh's shadow lines as well, where time itself played an important role in determining the narrative experience. Roy herself has spoken about the challenging narrative technique that she adopted. In her own words, the structure was the most challenging part of writing the book. It begins at the end and ends in the middle. If it had been a straight linear narrative, it would have meant something altogether different. Each ordinary moment becomes more heightened, more poignant, because it's viewed through the complex lens of both past and present. And this is being done simultaneously, as we would get to know. And the complexities which are inherent in this kind of a reading is also taken away, is also almost wished away, because it's in the form of the thoughts, images and languages of the children. A brief outline of the way the story is structured will be helpful for you to make sense of the novel. There are basically two important storylines and a set of backstories in this work. The first storyline is a 2-week period in the year 1969. During this period, Esther and Rahel are 7 years old, and this is the period which witnesses Sophie Mole's visit from England, and this is the time period during which Esther is molested at the cinema hall. There is a reference to this initially in chapter 1, where Rahel remembers what the orange drink lemon drink man did to Esther in Abhilash Talkies. The reader does not get to know yet what exactly happened to Esther in Abhilash Talkies in chapter 1. This is revealed only much later in one of the later chapters in page 98, where we get to know that Esther was actually sexually molested in the cinema hall while the others were watching the movie. And in this period, in this 2-week period in 1969, we also find the narration of Ammu's affair with Veluta, its discovery, and subsequently Veluta's death in custody. Sophie Mole also dies. She gets drowned to death during her visit from England, while she was also trying to get away along with the twins from the commotion that had ensued at home, because Ammu's affair with Veluta had just got discovered. And finally, in this 2-week period in 1969, we have this event, Ammu's expulsion from family, because she was discovered, her adulterous relation with Veluta was discovered, and Esther is sent to live with his father in Calcutta, and Rahel is supposed to live at home in the ancestral home in Imenam. So these are the set of major events which happen in the first storyline, which happens in 1969 during this 2-week period. But in the novel, you may not find them in succession one after the other. You would find them scattered in different chapters, in different sections. It is up to the reader to make sense of the storyline by bringing in together different images and different recollections from different narrative spaces. The second storyline happens in one day in 1993. We find this statement in chapter 20. 23 years later, Rahel, dark woman in a yellow t-shirt, turns to Esther in the dark. So this happens after 1969. The next important storyline is 1993, where after being separated for about 23 years, we find Rahel and Esther meeting again. Rahel was growing up in Imenam in the ancestral home, and Esther was being brought up by his father in Calcutta. So both of them, they meet in Imenam, and it also results, because of the trauma that they had encountered, this reunion, it had a different emotional appeal to them. They end up having an incestuous sexual encounter, which was also critiqued heavily, the portrayal of which was also critiqued heavily in some of the circles, at least within this nation. And there are a set of backstories. Yeah, for instance, Baby Kuchama's unrequited love for Father Mulligan, or Ammu's failed marriage. It's referred to in the past, the failed marriage with Esther's and Rahel's father, and Chaco's Oxford education and his relationship with Margaret. Chaco also happens to be an ardent communist believer, but the kind of things that he does is in stark contrast with the ideals that he believes in with respect to his loyalty towards communism. So he's also presented with the intention of satirically presenting a communist character. There are certain extremely interesting themes and aspects in this narration. Again, we would find this being scattered across this book. There is the idea of being frozen in time, which Roy almost continuously explores in this novel. There are certain recurrent images like Rahel's wristwatch, which was a plastic toy watch with time painted on it, and it always read 10 to 2. This watch and its repeated occurrence in the novel, it refers to the trauma which freezes Esther and Rahel in time. And we also find Rahel talking about time as something which she could perhaps move freely, which she could perhaps bring ahead or take back according to her will and according to her fancy. But on the contrary, what happens in their life is that after the discovery of Ammu's relation with Veluta and after her death, we realize that time freezes, time stands frozen for Esther and Rahel. And in the same way, Esther responds to these tragedies and trauma in his life by withdrawing to himself. He just goes silent. He stops talking after Ammu's death. Esther's silence is a way of showing that he just froze in time. He refused to communicate after that. He refuses to engage with anything after that because time just stands still for him after that traumatic period. And there are also Ammu's words which desperately and rather miserably try to freeze words and moments in time when they are trying to bid farewell to each other. It is written that Ammu is worried that Rahel may end up saying something really grown up. So she tries to stop Rahel from talking so that she can freeze that moment in time. She deliberately tries to freeze time, and she's in denial of the disintegration of her family. Ammu comes across as that kind of a person who perhaps believes that if she does not talk about it, it's not there at all. So when these three, Rahel, Esther and Ammu, when they are saying farewell to each other, perhaps for good, we find that there is a way in which all three of them are forced to be frozen in time. And we also find them doing it, indulging in it rather deliberately. And talking about the end, there is no the end moment to this novel. There is no closure. There is no neat tying up that one would expect out of a narrative. In fact, on the contrary, and very interestingly, the novel ends with this word tomorrow. The ending of the novel, this is how it reads. She turned to say it once again, Nale, the term in Malayalam for tomorrow. And then, after a full stop, tomorrow. And there's a full stop. This is how the novel ends. It ends with the word tomorrow, indicating that there is no closure. And this is a deliberate attempt, perhaps, to show that no attempt is being made to formally close the novel. There is still stories waiting in anticipation, because remember the epigraph at the outset, there is no single way in which any story can be told. And this is not the end in that sense. Talking about the aspects of language, this work has been praised much for its originality and inventiveness. John Updike, one of the critics, has pointed out that a novel of real ambition must invent its own language, and this one does. And it is very evident when we go through The God of Small Things that the novel tries to invent and reinvent language, and not just English language, but there's also the bringing in of the regional flavor by using Malayalam words quite generously without even providing a glossary. So that's the kind of magic that this work does to the idea of language, the aspect of language. It breaks the standard rules of spelling, grammar, syntax and punctuation. It reworks capitalizations. There are neologisms being coined. It employs phonetics. There are typographical devices, lists, catalogs, anagrams, puns, palindromes. It plays with language in whichever way possible. And this is being done through the point of view, from the point of view of these children, Esther and Rahel. And this is a way in which Roy also successfully satirizes the language and the happenings of the adult world, because it is these kids, it is these children who found who get a lot of delight in using this language in such an irreverent way and in such a playful way. And there are a number of intertextual references from a range of locations and a range of time periods, just like one would find in The Midnight's Children. There are references to Shakespeare, Tempest and Julius Caesar, The Jungle Book, Heart of Darkness, The Great Gatsby, A Tale of Two Cities, Modern Times. These are fairly recent works from popular culture. Mutiny on the Bounty, The Sound of Music. So the list could be endless. One could perhaps find out many more references to other texts from different time periods and even references to the contemporary popular culture. This is a novel which could be read as a critique of social structures. It could be read as a critique of the caste system or the Syrian Christians of Kerala and the way in which untouchability, the practice of untouchability, has seeped into their culture, because it is said that the Syrian Christians of Kerala are also Brahminical descendants. Yeah? And this is a critique of communism as well. Yeah? And the bringing together of these three aspects, the caste system, Christianity and communism, is what makes this novel radically different from other kinds of socio-historical critiques of these times. So as you prepare for the next session, let me appeal to you to read the novel and also be familiar with this reading, Older Than the Church, Christianity and Caste and the God of Small Things, which appeared in the EPW in 2003 and authored by Ajay Shekhar. A familiarity with this essay, with this piece, would also give you a sense of the critical practices which could be identified within this narrative space of the God of Small Things. So with this, we also wrap up today's session. I thank you for listening and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.